Hello, I'm Kevin O'Hare with the Office of Assessment Accountability's Division of Assessment Accountability Support. Today I'm sharing with you some specific direction for the Spring 2021 Alternate CAPE Test Administration. The first thing we want to discuss is why we decided to postpone the assessment. There were several reasons why the decision was made to push the test window from February 15th to March 22nd. One of the biggest reasons was the amount of time provided to teach the standards. The intention was to give as much time as possible to teachers to provide the content to their students. Another reason was to try to align with districts ending the school year. The variety of dates for districts to finish up the year will be spread across the later parts of April, throughout all of May, and into early June. Our goal is to try to reach those closing dates as well as allowing additional time to teach. Another reason was to allow the U.S. Department of Education to provide additional guidance on if spring testing would occur. At the time of this recording, the plan is to administer the assessment beginning March 22nd through May 28th. However, the start date of March 22nd is not mandatory, as we have always shared in years past. That is the first day that administration can begin. The end date is set at May 28th. However, districts reserve the right to stop testing before May 28th if they choose. The only way to test after May 28th is to contact the Division of Assessment Accountability Support to work out details for an extension. The test, due to the time administration, will occur and be combined into one test window. That will allow 10 weeks to complete the assessment. On this slide, you will see the February DAC training link highlighted. You can actually view this link in slideshow, and that link will be active and take you to the February DAC trainings, where you can view the training and the handouts that were released on February 15th. Again, you must be viewing in slideshow before any of the links are live. The next section we will discuss is the alternate assessment targets. Before I mention the alternate assessment targets, I first want to remind everyone that there are no separate standards for the Kentucky alternate assessment. All students enrolled in a Kentucky public school are taught the Kentucky academic standards in their full capacity. The targets are, however, selected standards that may have been reduced in depth and breadth to develop test items around. So to repeat, all Kentucky academic standards should be taught, but the selected alternate assessment targets are what the test is made up of. With the testing window moving from 2 windows to 1, all targets will be tested during the March 22nd through May 28th timeframe. You can visit the Kentucky Academic Standards alternate CAPE link shared here on this slide to identify the targets for each content area. When you review those documents, they are broken into 2 windows. Some targets may be shown to be tested during both windows 1 and 2. So now let's answer the big question that so many are asking. Who do we test? The best answer I can give you is that any student who you will have in-person access to during the testing window should be tested. There are so many different situations or scenarios that it is impossible for us to think about or discuss every one. For alternate, I can again tell you that the student must be in person with a certified test administrator in order to be tested. And without a doubt, the #1 priority is to do this in a safe manner and follow all guidelines for masking and social distancing. We want to encourage you to test students if you can, but always do it safely while following the guidelines that have been set in place. For students who are in person and receiving instruction, that may look a little different in different situations. It could occur on school grounds. If they are coming to school, they would be expected to test, as you can see on the slide, by student A representation on school grounds and face-to-face. Student B shows an example of testing in person for the alternate CAPE off school grounds, where a trained certified test administrator will administer the assessment to the student. This could include maybe the public library, a community center. It could be an off-ground location that maybe the parent was comfortable bringing the student to that wasn't actually on school grounds. Could be a homebound student. If a homebound student is still receiving homebound services and that certified school staff member, certified teacher, test administrator is able to go into the home and access the student in person, then that student will be expected to take the test. That's represented here based on student C. The last student here on slide 8, student D, has not been in school all year. They have had no access to school staff at any point and will remain virtual with no access to school staff throughout the testing window. Now, in this situation, testing obviously would not be an option. Once again, you've got to be in person and to test our alternate students. There is no virtual, or there is no remote testing as far as in an online capacity. It has to be face-to-face as our test or paper pencil. Now, in this situation, testing obviously would be out of the picture. So for those students who are unable to test because they can't be accessed in person in a one-on-one capacity, your DAC or BAC will follow guidelines that were shared in the February DAC trainings, specifically in the SDRR section, that describe the process for marking students who have been and will remain virtual throughout the remainder of the school year. So in that SDRR training, the DACs and BACs will be able to review the information that was shared out and how to proceed in marking those students based upon how they should be identified in Infinite Campus for those attendance records. The last thing I want to discuss before moving to slide 9 is the guidance documents that the Office of Assessment and Accountability and the Division of Assessment and Accountability Support have created. The Kentucky Summative Assessment Administration Guidance 2020 through 2021 school year and the Participation in Spring 2021 Kentucky State Testing are available for more information regarding all testing. That also includes the alternate K-Prep. Also concerning all test administrations that occur in person, whether they occur in school buildings, alternate locations, or in home or hospital settings, any test administration should be provided while following the guidance on safety expectations and best practices for Kentucky schools K through 12, as well as the recommendations of local health departments at the time of testing. Again, there are several links provided on this slide. To access these links, you must be viewing this presentation in slideshow mode. The next topic we're going to share today is the Quality of School Climate and Safety Survey for students participating in the Kentucky Alternate Assessment. This survey is a requirement that must be administered to all students. This includes students participating in the Kentucky Alternate Assessment. There are surveys represented for students at grades 3 through 5 and then grades 6 through high school, designed for students who will be assessed. The survey for alternate assessment students consists of items detailing school climate, school safety, and new this year is opportunities to learn. Opportunities to learn are the types of support, options, or resources students have received during the COVID span. It is critical to see how students have endured the time in and out of school and the resources they have utilized. Every question will have 4 answer options. They are strongly disagree, agree, and strongly agree. The 4 answer options are the same as what is provided to students completing the survey for the regular assessment. Questions in grades 3 through 5 may differ from those at grades 6 through high school. One very important point to note is that in high school, only students in grades 10 and 11 will complete the survey. So again, I repeat, only 10th and 11th graders at high school complete the survey. Students who are in grade 9 or grade 12 or grade 14 would not complete the survey. It's only those that are specifically in a tested grade. And once again, we're aligning the requirements 100% with the general assessment. So students in grades 9, 12, or 14 that are in the Kentucky Alternate Assessment will not complete the survey this year. The survey questions are found on the Kentucky Department of Education website. To access, you will go to the Assessment Accountability page and select Accountability from the drop-down menu. There you will select Quality of School Climate and Safety. Once that page loads, there will be two documents. One will be specifically for students in grades 3 through 5, and the other for students in grades 6 through high school. The survey must be administered before the administration of the attainment task begins. So I'm going to repeat this several times, but if I'm repeating it, it's pretty important. The first thing to remember is whenever you access that binder to start the spring test administration, the first thing you're going to do before you administer any reading, math, science, social studies, writing, any of those things, you're going to administer this survey first. Okay? Once the survey is administered, then you can follow the order maintained in the binder. When you access the testing binder, the survey will follow the directions and the order for test administration. So when you open up that binder, the first thing you'll see are the directions. Right behind those directions is going to be the survey. Okay? Following the survey will then be the content areas that will be tested. There will be a score sheet provided to record the student responses to the survey in the same manner as what we do for the attainment task. So you're going to have a yellow copy of a piece of paper that is going to be provided for you to record the student responses for this survey. That's the same process we do for the attainment task. You record your responses on that paper copy, and then you're going to provide those responses in the student registration database. So when you enter the student registration database, there's going to be a survey tab in there in the SRD, student registration database. The results may be entered in the same time frame that scores may be entered. That's March 22nd through June 4th. The responses from the survey for students participating in the Kentucky Alternate Assessment will be integrated into results for all students during fall reporting. So you're not going to have a specific breakout of student responses just for alternate. Based upon confidentiality and restrictions, all alternate students are going to be integrated in with all the other students for your school and district when those results are reported out. Like the attainment task, supports and adaptations are permitted on the survey as long as the intention of the question is maintained with no guidance on how the student should respond. Some examples are shared here on slide 12. However, these are not the only supports that are permitted. Again, I want to emphasize that as long as you're following the same guidance that you would be allowed when administering the attainment task, we are going to allow that on the survey as well. The main thing is that you keep the full intention of the question. It doesn't change. The intent of it doesn't change. The same way you couldn't change the intent of a test item. And you also can't provide any guidance to the student on how he or she should respond. Once again, the same way on a test item. Slides 14 through 22 will give specific direction to the spring administration. You can also find the information for slides 17 through 22 in the special guidance handout that will accompany this presentation. The goal this year is to try to be flexible while following all regulatory guidelines set forth by state and local and federal government. Understanding that states and districts have faced so many challenges over the past year, we wanted to try to provide some clarification specific to this spring, if at all possible. So some of the information that you will see on slides 14 through 16 is repeated. And again, I shared just a few minutes ago, if I'm continuing to repeat it, it's pretty important by all means. As the slide shares here on 14, the test dates begin and end on March 22nd and May the 28th. There is also some additional clarification here about start and stop dates following district and state requirements. So again, those starting and ending dates are provided here, along with if there are any specific guidelines around that end date can be an earlier date for districts if they so choose, and anyone testing beyond that May 28th date must seek permission from the Office of Assessment and Accountability. Slide 15 again shares the graph that was shown on slide 8. The intention is to note that the alternate assessment does not offer online testing or any type of remote testing where a certified test administrator is not available. So for the alternate assessment, the student must be accessible in person for a face-to-face administration. Again, the proper social distancing and masking requirements must always be followed. On slide 6, we discussed the alternate assessment targets that were the test design for the Kentucky Academic Standards. We also talked about that when combining the testing windows into one, we would test all targets as the IDEA and ESSA guidelines require us to provide a full-scale assessment. There's little to no flexibility there. We have to provide a full range of content, and to be honest, since we're already reducing the number of standards that we're focusing on for our assessments, to reduce it even more would definitely not be something that the federal government would permit. Wanting to pay specific attention on slide 16, the second bullet shares how instruction may occur or may continue while the assessment is occurring. So I'm going to give you an example. If tasks A through C are being administered, so if those are the tasks that are being tested, task A through C, then instruction for the standards represented in tasks D through F may continue. So you can't be teaching tasks D through F themselves. They should be stored away in a secure location by the DAC or BAC until they are to be administered. But if tasks A through C are being administered or being tested, then the standards that link to task D through F, that instruction can continue. If the district opts to test all tasks A through F for the content area, then other content area instruction may occur. For example, if you're testing all of reading task A through F, then if those are being tested, you obviously shouldn't be still teaching those standards while they're being tested. But you can teach math, you can teach writing, science, or social studies, all those other content areas. That instruction can still continue. All right, so again, our goal this year is to be flexible if possible. We want to allow districts to decide how they would like to administer the task. The option can be to administer all of what we consider window 1 task, A through C, first, before moving to task D through F, or some may decide to administer all tasks A through F before moving to the next content area. An example might be that all of reading tasks A through F are completed before moving to mathematics. The order of the binder must be maintained, but combining the same content areas, A through C and D through F, is allowed. You will receive specific guidance later in slides 23 through 29. As the slide shares here, in the past, our office has only allowed one content area per day to be tested. Due to the availability of students and the amount of time they may remain in person, we want to be as flexible as we can. So in doing so, our office is allowing more than one content area per day to be administered. Like every other testing administration that you've saw in the past, a content area is considered task A through C or task D through F. Each of those would technically represent one content area when the administration has occurred in the past. So if you recall in the past, if you've done reading A through C, then at the end of that test for window 1, it would say, only one content area is permitted per day. However, this year, while trying to be flexible, we are allowing more than one content area to be administered. We're going to allow the district to work with your teachers to help make that decision. So the department will not limit the number of content areas assessed in one day. However, it is very, very critical to note that if a student at any point becomes frustrated, tired, or overwhelmed during a test administration, it should stop immediately. Even if you're on task A, question 3, and the student becomes agitated, stop, take a break for a bit, and come back to it and continue from the point where you stopped. Okay. Again, it is always required that the order in the binder is maintained. We've talked about that on several different occasions throughout the presentation today. This means that the quality of school climate and safety survey is completed first. Then for grades 3 through 8 and 10 specifically, reading will be administered first, followed by mathematics. For grade 4, science would follow mathematics. For grade 5, social studies would follow mathematics, and then writing would follow social studies. As we will talk about, the binder, when received, will just contain tasks A through C. The task D through F will accompany, but they will be shrink wrapped. So if the choice is made to use option 2 that we talked about a couple of slides ago, then the shrink wrap materials may be opened and provided directly after task A through C to complete the entire content assessment for task A through F. So to give you a visual of that, or to give you an image of that to think about, if you have task A through C in the binder and you're wanting to complete that specific reading content area, then you would need to remove task D through F for reading from the shrink wrap materials and administer those directly after task A through C. Slide 20 shows an example of how the materials would look for a grade 3 assessment. Again, task A through C are in the binder and can be administered after the survey has been completed. If the choice is made to administer the entire content, task A through F, then the shrink wrap materials could be opened and combined with task A through C. The reason we are being so specific to how much a content area represents is that we want to test students who are in person during the test window if we possibly can. However, we also want everyone to understand that if an entire content task, A through F, was completed at one setting, that would be 30 questions for that student to complete. Another example is if task A through C for reading and task A through C for mathematics were administered in one setting, that would also be 30 questions for one administration. So what we're getting at is, again, we completely understand the time crunch and the limited amount of time that you're going to have with every student. But we want to emphasize that if the student at any point becomes overwhelmed or frustrated, the test should stop immediately. It may resume once the test administrator feels it is appropriate to do so. We don't want any student to become frustrated in any form or fashion. Or we want to just follow those guidelines. So again, we're allowing districts to determine how much they're going to administer in one day, but we can't emphasize enough that testing must stop if the student becomes frustrated, overwhelmed, or tired for any reason. So for submitting scores and in your survey results, score entry is no different this year than any other year, except this year you can enter scores for task A through C and task D through F at the same time. So in the past, you were used to submitting scores for task A through C in the fall during window 1 and then task D through F in the spring during window 2. Well, this year, both A through C and D through F are going to be open. They're still going to be shown as tasks A through C and D through F. But you can put all those scores in during this March 22nd through May 28th or June 4th for score submission time frame. So when the SRD opens on March 22nd, for teachers, you must first be approved by your DAC or district level representative in order to access the SRD. Once that access is given, you can enter scores for students who are registered in the database. If you encounter a student who is missing, contact your DAC or the contact person in place for your school or district who oversees the alternate assessment. I encourage you all to visit the February DAC training link on slide 4 and access the information that went out on February 15th. There is a PowerPoint titled SRD for DACs and one titled SRD for teachers. You can also access it on this slide by selecting the student registration database link, and it'll take you to the alternate K-Prep resources page, where then you will scroll approximately halfway down that page and you will see those specific PowerPoint trainings. One is an SRD for teachers, the other is the SRD for DACs, and also you will find housed there the SRD manual. So it gives specific guidance to how to navigate the student registration database. So now we want to talk a little bit about materials and what to expect when you receive your materials. So the first thing is materials will be sent to districts sometime between March 16th and March 19th. Typically the first shipment will go out on March 16th and the majority of the materials will go out those first 2 days, which will be March 16th and 17th. So what we're going to look at specifically in slides 24 through 29 is we're going to highlight some things to look for, whether you're a DAC, a BAC, or a test administrator. What should you expect when those materials arrive? So first, let's highlight anything new for this year. We have talked about the testing window being combined and all materials arriving in the shipment to districts on March 16th through 19th. It is also important to note that there will be a DAC envelope that will provide directions on how the DAC should distribute materials to each school. There will be a back envelope specific to each individual school where an alternate assessment student is identified through Infinite Campus. Now, one thing I do want to note here is if the back in your school is not the person who is in charge of overseeing the alternate assessment, maybe it's a guidance counselor, maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's someone that's not what you would deem the back. Whoever that person is, you want to make sure that that's who the DAC provides the materials to, but they're going to be identified through a back envelope. So the DAC's going to determine who that person is, and then provide them the appropriate materials for that school. There will be a white supplemental materials envelope provided for each school that will contain USB drives. I refer to them as flash drives or thumb drives, but the technical term apparently is USB drives, whatever you might refer to them as. Now, these USB drives are going to be in that supplemental materials envelope. Also, there will be scripts provided for animations, and also for the first time, scripts for specific pictures. Additional materials that you might find, but are not limited here, are mathematics counters and specific science materials. So going back to the USB drives will be specific based on the grade span they are representing. Those arriving for elementary and middle schools will have animations and or audio files for both science and reading. High school this year will only have animations for science. The USB drives will contain all files and they will be delivered on the drive by content area and then by Windows 1 or 2. Now, that's going to be if something is provided for both windows. It could just be that maybe the task A through C has an animation, but nothing for task D through F. If that's the case, you would just find animated information for task A through C. Another important thing to note here is that teachers may also access these animations and audio files through the online training system. Now, as long as the teacher has selected the grades, in this example for reading, it would be grades 3 through 8, since elementary and middle school both have reading animations. And for science, it would be grades 4, 7, or 11 when selecting their grade representations in the registration process that occurred back in the fall. The teacher should see the Access Science or Reading videos listed under Teacher Tools. The last thing to share regarding the USB drives is that they do not ship back. So to clarify, no materials ship back. I want to apologize to DACs and BACs as that is not what was shared in the February 15th DAC training for the alternate K-Prep. It was shared there, and at that time, the intent was to send the USB drives back. But after digging a little deeper and determining that it would probably cost just as much to ship them back as it would be to replace them the following year, the decision was made to not ship anything back. So if the USB drives remained in the district, one, they could be erased and all testing information erased from them, and they could be used for some of the tasks or some other instructional practice, but not test materials. Or you could just destroy the USB drives in the same fashion that you would any other secure test materials. All scripts for animated videos will be part of the supplemental materials envelope sent to each school. As we shared on slide 25, for the first time this year, scripts will also be provided for pictures and illustrations to assist in explaining in a form of alt text what the picture or illustration represents. This gives a consistent description for students across the state. Some districts submitted a list of students back in the November-December timeframe for students who may need tactile graphics for any student, maybe with a visual impairment. If you were one of those districts, you can expect the materials to be broken down by window and provided in a Tyvek envelope. The last thing to discuss is score sheets. All responses should first be recorded on a score sheet in the same manner as what has been the practice in the past. The only difference now is that the alternate assessment folder, or the AAAF, is no longer required, so those score sheets may be stored in a secure location selected by the district. So again, when you administer those attainment tasks, you always provided your response on a score sheet. That score sheet will still be provided with these materials. However, they're not going to be housed in a AAAF unless you're a district that's still using that AAAF. If that's the case, that's your choice. That's the district choice. But we do ask that they be placed in a secure location. The Quality of School Climate and Safety Survey will also have a response sheet provided. As we talked about earlier, it's going to be yellow in color, and specific directions are going to be included in the directions for DACs, BACs, and test administrators on these specific score sheets, where they're located, and in their utilization process. The transition attainment record has not been discussed much today, but it is still a required assessment at grade 11. Now, for specific guidance around the TAR being administered at grades 12 and 14, I again encourage you to visit the February DAC training for the alternate K-Prep. And as we've talked about, there you can go back to slide 4 and you can access that information by clicking that live link and going back to the alternate K-Prep training video released with, as part of the February DAC training series. So there have been many questions about the TAR and how should the administration occur this year based upon the students and how they've been virtual at times, and maybe they've been in person, and then maybe they've been out of school for a bit. So one thing to remember when we talk about the TAR is that the TAR administration began on October 5th. And in reality, the student is not required to even be present for the committee that administers the TAR to conduct that checklist review. Remember, it's a checklist style assessment. So the TAR this year is based on standards from last year and the years past. There's no new standards incorporated on the TAR this year. If the TAR committee found that a student may not be familiar with the specific content represented, you know, in the past it's asked if a student wasn't familiar with maybe a specific standard representation, that something be developed and provided to that student. That can still happen. However, that can be developed and provided remotely. Now, first thing you're going to say is, I thought we couldn't test remotely. You're not testing remotely. You're providing an instructional piece representative of what that standard is asking for. You're providing an instructional piece to that student. Then once that instructional piece, once you've received the results from that student, that's going to give you a clearer picture on how you would score that particular item, or how you would score that particular checklist evaluation, whether it be a 0 of no knowledge, a 1 of some knowledge, or a 2 of mastered. Slide 31 here shows the TAR assessment based on standards administered this year. The TAR will look the same as it has the past 3 years plus. Next year, the TAR will change only for grade 11 students. Now again, this slide represents the changes over the next 3 years. And by 3 years, I mean this year, next year, and the following year. The former assessment standards means the TAR is based on the TAR assessment that was provided over the past 3 years and counting. This slide shows the newly revised dates for spring 2021. Originally, the last day to complete the online combined overview attainment task training and quiz was February 10th. That has been pushed out to March 1st. Materials will arrive in districts the week of March 16th through the 19th, with testing beginning on March 22nd. Again, testing does not have to start on March 22nd, but must conclude by May the 28th, unless an extension is requested from the Office of Assessment Accountability. The last day to enter scores in the student registration database will be June 4th. That's a hard date just because of getting things pulled together and getting information put together so that we can provide that to our data team to start compiling information as we move into the summer. The last topic I want to share with you is pretty exciting news. It's relevant to what we're talking about today, but I want to share with you that beginning March the 8th, there will be 6 one-hour sessions that will be titled Alternate K-Prep Office Hours that will be provided for teachers, BACs, DACs, and others who will be part of the spring administration. It will give you an opportunity to ask questions. These sessions will be in a question answer format, so you can type your question and then we will provide a response to it. I do want to note that we will not be able to address questions about who should test. I encourage viewers to, even though I know it's a very important question, that could take up the entire 6-hour sessions because there's so many students that be represented, and as we talked about several times during this presentation, there's so many different scenarios we couldn't touch on every one. So I want to encourage viewers to resort to slides 8 and 15 of this presentation, along with accessing the links found on slide 8, where specific spring test administration guidance was released by the Office of Assessment Accountability. And again, just a reminder, for those links to be live on these slides, the presentations must be viewed via slideshow. But I do want to encourage anyone that has questions around this presentation today, or any other assessment administration, any administration questions for this spring, to join us for one of those alternate K-Prep office hours administration sessions and provide your questions for us to give you a response back to. So this concludes the presentation. I hope that the information shared today will serve beneficial as we move toward the spring 2021 alternate K-Prep assessment administration. Please know that we understand it's been a very long year. You have been faced with many challenges, many obstacles, and still you have given it your best to make sure your students were given every possible opportunity. We ask you to do the same with this year's assessment. Do your best, give them students the same opportunity, and that's all anyone can ask from you. Thank you all for everything that you've always done. It's always been a pleasure to work with you. I'm a firm believer, as I've said several times, Kentucky has the best teachers in the country, and the way you represent your students, that just proves that day in and day out. So if you have any questions, please join us on one of the upcoming alternate K-Prep office hours, or you can email me, Kevin O'Hare, at kevin.o'hare@education.ky.gov, or by calling 502-564-4394. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great day and a wonderful test administration this year. Thank you.